Today on CityCast Philly, it's the Friday News Roundup. We're talking about this week's clearing out of a Kensington encampment. What happened on the ground? Where are unhoused people going? And what's next for this neighborhood? And University of Pennsylvania grad students voted to unionize. It's Friday, May 10th. I'm Trinae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Joining me this week is Max Marin, reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Hey, Max.
Hey, Trinae. Great to be back.
And Kristen Marsberger Garza, business reporter at WHYY News. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Before we get into the news of the week, let's start off with an icebreaker. This week, Pat's, the iconic Philly cheesesteak spot in South Philly, reopened its storefront on East Passyunk Avenue after closing for renovations. According to Axios Philadelphia, there's a new kitchen, second floor offices, the facade has been updated, and there's a takeout counter that's been raised and extended. But the big news was that they added chicken cheesesteaks and breakfast sandwiches served on a long roll. And then last week, Jim's Steaks on South Street reopened after being closed because of a fire. Jim's added more seating, and they've included mosaics into the store from local artist Isaiah Zagar, who created the Magic Garden. So my question is, the renovations sound cool for both spots, but who has the better food?
I'm going to say neither. Actually, I think I'm going to say Del Sandro's. I think that they chop it up real nice and it's real smooth and you don't feel like gross after eating Del Sandro's as you do some others. They're not as greasy, I feel like.
Got you.
I'm a Jim's guy through and through.
Yes.
Spent too much time on South Street in high school. Gave me a mental illness.
Same.
I have a Jim's problem now.
I was just gonna say that, like, Jim's is where I grew up. Jim's fed me in my teens.
Yeah, a lot of nourishment there.
Right. I would get my steak with my fried onions and provolone cheese. So, what kind of cheese are you getting on your steak?
I'm classic American. Sometimes whiz, but I mean, I'm getting older now, you know.
That processed cheese can't handle it.
Yeah, I know. The body is the temple.
Kristen, what about you? What are you getting on your steak?
I actually like mushrooms, onions, and provolone.
Great recommendations. All right, let's talk about some big news stories happening in the city this week. Max, a lot of eyes were watching the Kensington neighborhood this week. Mayor Sherrell Parker and other city officials have been talking about Wednesday, May 8th, for weeks now. And the plan was to clear out a homeless encampment along a stretch of Kensington Avenue and move people off the street. Max, can you just set the scene? What happened Wednesday morning?
Well, Wednesday morning on this 2-block stretch of Kensington Avenue, everything was supposed to start around 8 a.m., but I luckily got there early in a sense of distrust, and things actually kicked off before 7 a.m. When police started clearing out the dozens of remaining people and unhoused people who were living along this stretch of the road. You got to keep in mind it's sort of a really struggling commercial stretch right underneath the L tracks that has a lot of shuttered businesses, but also a lot of active businesses, and it's sort of buttressed on both sides by residential blocks. So it's a pretty chaotic scene, and the rain is pouring down on Wednesday morning as police are sort of there first and trying to get people out of this zone that they have set up cordoned off tape around and push them off onto the side streets. But that was not the order that things were supposed to happen in.
What do you mean by that?
The outreach workers are typically leading this kind of response. Now, this isn't the first time the city has cleared an encampment in Kensington. They've done this is, I think, the 6th one since 2017. And Each time it is led by city contracted and outreach workers or people from the Office of Homeless Services who are out there. They sort of do what they like to call like a warm handoff, and they go up to the remaining tents at these encampments with these people who are most of whom are very, very deep in addiction and fearful of treatment. They try to get them to move off, and the police are only there as a sort of last resort. And the order was sort of flipped this time, and a lot of people were taken off guard because it was advertised as an encampment clearing like all of the others. And the outreach teams did not arrive until 8 a.m. when the city said that the clearing would start. And that is, there was a bit of confusion on the ground as to why the police had sort of cleared out most of the people from the target zone before they arrived.
What did the area look like before the sweep?
This is a heavily, heavily populated area with a large street population. For the last 10 years, seeing an increasingly visible presence of people experiencing homelessness, struggling with opioid addiction, and various other toxic drugs that are infiltrated the street supply. It's all right in plain sight, and this is the issue that has really driven Kensington to the forefront of the conversation in the city and made it such a campaign issue for our current mayor. The issues are just impossible to ignore. You can see open injection. You can see very difficult to see wounds on the human flesh caused by tranquilizer. People have from all over the world, know about Kensington now. Videos have gone viral over and over again. The level of human suffering that you could see on this, particularly on this 2-block stretch that they were targeting, is often compared to something out of a sort of post-apocalyptic novel or something like that. It's very difficult, but it's a very real situation and very sensitive situation that the city has to deal with.
Max, I've read that there was some criticism over why police officers were involved in this dismantling of the encampment. Why were the police officers involved?
Well, police were supposed to be operating in a sort of support capacity, as they do with all encampment and clearings, but they were the first to arrive, and they were the ones who told people to get out of the target zone. There's still unanswered questions about that. People are still sort of upset about the order in which things went down. It was very unconventional. But the city has ultimately called this a success. They said that they got dozens of people in treatment over the last couple of weeks of doing outreach in that area, and ultimately, at the end of the day, the same outcome has happened. The area was cleared, cleaned. People were either offered services on the adjacent blocks, but there are still hundreds of people out there in Kensington who are unhoused, who did not accept services, and they are welcome. The street is open back up again, that they have cleared out, but they are actively trying to prevent people from setting up other encampments there. But the surrounding blocks and residential areas are going to be sort of dealing with the fallout of this for the next couple of weeks to come.
Were there any major issues reported on Wednesday morning?
There were no arrests that were reported, but there was a sense of just deep disturbance and a shakeup, especially from social service providers and advocates for people in addiction who were just taken aback by the order in which things went down. And, this is just the beginning of what is going to be a long-term process in Kensington that is going to become increasingly law enforcement focused. And so I think that Wednesday's enforcement raises a lot of questions about that and what that's going to look like in the few weeks, considering that this was supposed to be an outreach-led effort and it ended up being a police-led effort.
And some other concerns that people had was, where is everyone going to go? What other parts of the city, what other neighborhoods? What have you heard about where people ended up?
I'm out there all the time talking to people, and both in Kensington and the surrounding neighborhoods, and they are already seeing the displacement. Prior to this encampment clearing on Wednesday, police officers have been doing a more informal, aggressive policing and not turning a blind eye to sort of open air drug offenses, drug use, paraphernalia, things like that have always been sort of condoned and sanctioned in Kensington informally. And that has already started pushing people out into other areas where they feel like they will be hassled less for what they need to do to survive. On Wednesday, there was a lot of immediate displacement into the surrounding blocks, and some neighbors were upset. We spoke to a couple people who were under the impression that everybody was going to be taken into treatment and that this problem was going to be resolved, and that's not the case. And what had happened was there was just an overflow. You close down 2 blocks where a lot of people are, they're pushed right onto the immediate blocks. And you saw a lot of that yesterday. You saw a lot of confusion. You saw a lot of sort of frustration with this situation that has been going on a long time.
All right. You can follow the continuing coverage of this story from Max and his colleagues at the Inquirer by clicking the links in our show notes. More news of the week after the break. All right, shifting gears. Kristen, you've been covering unionizing efforts at the University of Pennsylvania. Graduate student workers have voted to form a union. Catch us up. What are workers' demands here?
Yeah, I would say, this is a pretty big deal. It's one of the largest new unions at a private employer in quite a number of years. It will be several thousand people. And primarily, I would say that they're probably going to ask for increased wages. So for a number of years, the minimum stipend for a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania was only $30,000 until last year, so 2023. And graduate students told me, who have been organizing for several years, that that's simply not enough to live in Philadelphia.
Right.
That's hardly a full-time kind of wage. It's certainly not a living wage. And there were other considerations that sounded like were important to folks, such as benefits. A lot of these grad students have families, and so they're trying to support families on $30,000 a year, now $38,000 as of last year, in sort of a minimum category. Some people make a little bit more, but folks say that they need access to childcare services. And then also there's a lot of international students at UPenn who are grad students, and they really want more support when it comes to their specific needs around visas and various things. And so it sounds like higher pay, better benefits, and more support for international student workers are really the top priorities.
Can you explain some of the work that grad student workers do at the university?
Sure. So the average grad student worker is there for about 6 years. Some of them can be there for as short of 2 years, but the average is about 6 years. And during that time, they are working toward their own education. They're getting a PhD typically, and they're also working as teaching assistants, as lab instructors, as instructors, also research assistants. So they're helping faculty write grants and conduct experiments. And so it's very much a hybrid work and study situation.
How many people could this new union represent?
I would say this new union could represent about 4,000 graduate student workers at UPenn.
Kristen, from your reporting, the student workers have decided to join the United Auto Workers Union, right?
Yes. And some folks think that that's a little odd, but I was talking to a university professor, and she said that in her circles, they're more well known as the United Academic Workers because there are so many graduate student workers who have joined them. I think that there's just been a lot of consolidation in unions. You have folks who are part of the United Steelworkers who are not working with steel. So I think it just speaks to the established national unions that exist, and about 25% of United Auto Worker Union chapters include graduate students.
Interesting. Now, how has their employer, Penn, responded to this union?
They've asserted that these grad student workers have ample benefits, and their compensation package, which includes tuition reimbursement, is $88,000 a year. They stood up a section of a website with all these frequently asked questions about what it would mean. They tried to say that if the grad student workers unionize, that it would harm the relationship between the faculty that they work for and the student workers themselves. And, ultimately, after they voted in favor, and they voted overwhelmingly in favor, it was like 97% of people who did vote, about 1,800 folks went to the ballot box. The university has essentially recognized that the union won, and they're waiting for the National Labor Relations Board to officially certify the election, just sort of an administrative process. But the university has been fighting even at that level. They tried to carve out some student workers who are in their first and second year, saying that they don't qualify as workers, that they're just students because they're not holding as many sort of like teaching duties because they're too young. And so there's been a lot of pushback through this whole process, even through formal channels. But the university has kind of lost at every turn. But now they're willing to negotiate a contract, it sounds like.
Kristen, you also reported that grad students at Penn have been trying to form a union for more than 20 years. They tried in 2003. Why do you think they were able to be so successful now?
I think it's a combination of factors. The Biden administration is pretty union friendly, and whoever is the president sets up the National Labor Relations Board. And so by proxy, Biden's NLRB board is pretty union friendly as well. For a long time, there was debate about whether private university grad student workers were even considered employees. So there was a lot of back and forth in case law about that. And so I think that is one factor. Another factor is the low unemployment rate. When there's low unemployment, workers typically have an upper hand. They have a bit more power. And I think the third really strong factor is that these tend to be younger workers and younger people by and large, as they see the academic system changing around them, as they see more pressure from student debt, as they see, fewer and fewer faculty tenure positions available for them for when they do graduate. Their workload certainly, I believe, has increased. A lot of the teaching load has less on faculty and more on the graduate student workers over the years. And I just think that in general, the younger workforce is just not willing to put up with some of the drudgery that grad student workers in the past have for a spot in academia. They want to be paid fairly now and not suffer now to be paid fairly later.
Okay, this sounds like a big win for student workers at Penn. Kristen, what still needs to happen, though?
So the student workers need to start meeting with each other and laying out what exactly they want to ask for in their union contract. And then Penn officials need to come to the bargaining table. The two sides need to hash out their first contract. And if you look at some other universities, that's probably going to take at least a year. Some universities have it's taken about 3 years. I believe at Columbia, workers had to strike before a contract was reached. So it's possible that Penn workers might have to strike.
You can read more of Kristen's reporting by checking out the link in our show notes. All right, that was Kristen Marsbrucker Garza, business reporter at WHYY News, and Max Marin, reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you both so much for joining me this week on CityCast Philly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's time for the tip of the week, where we share a life hack for living in Philly. Have you been getting spam calls about your energy bill lately? I have, and it's been annoying. PECO is warning customers to be on the lookout for scammers. The energy company says if you received a suspicious phone call, text message, email, or if anyone tries to visit you for an unscheduled in-person visit claiming to be from PECO, don't share personal information. Call PECO directly at 800-494-4000. If you have a tip of the week, We'd love to hear from you too. Call or text us at 215-259-8170. That's all for this week on CityCast Philly. Our executive producer is Laura Benchoff. Our producers are Abby Fritz, Elizabeth Kama, and Noah Snyderman. Our Hey Philly newsletter editor is Asha Prahar. And our host is me, Trinae Nuri. Music is by Philly's own Interminable, with additional music from All the Kimonos and James Weldon. If you enjoyed this week of episodes, tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Philly. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend and be safe, y'all. Bye.